Hi everyone, today on the podcast we have Evgeny Shadchnev. The story of how we met is completely funny. So we met at a yoga center in Portugal. He was guiding a meditation session. After it, I go ask his contact. I remember I go home, I Google his name, expecting to find some resources on meditation, but actually it was completely different. I was blown away because I see that Evgeny is the ex-CEO and the founder of Makers, a trainer provider in the UK with customers like Apple, Google, Microsoft, and so on. Today he's an author and a founder coach helping founder CEOs navigate their succession journey. And of course, he's a meditator and a seeker of awareness. In this episode, we deep dive his entrepreneurial and succession journey.
I was really stressed. My marriage just collapsed and the business just went through a fundraising round, which was somewhat stressful. So all of these things just happened at the same time. And at some point I sat down with the chair of the board and said, I'm not going anywhere. It's not an emergency and I'll keep running the business for as long as necessary, but we should probably start the conversation about finding a new chief executive.
He explains us what it is and why you need a founder coach. And of course, we're going to talk about other topics like meditation, awareness, and the illusion of free will.
Or rather seeing through the thoughts, not really removing them, but rather not seeing them as something permanent or serious or terribly important.
All of this and so much more at The Carlito Show. Enjoy the episode. You are an ex-CEO, startup founder, founder coach. I mean, many things. I was super surprised. I was like, wow. And basically, I really want to have this conversation because you are a mix between these two words, which is spirituality and entrepreneurship, which I'm very curious. I talk about this all the time. So thanks for being here.
And thank you for the invitation. These are indeed two topics which I really enjoy. Happy to talk about spirituality, meditation, entrepreneurship, founding companies, coaching founders, wherever the conversation takes us.
Let's do it. But Evgeny, for the people who don't know you, how would you introduce yourself? Because I gave some of the points about your background, but how would you introduce yourself?
So I'm a founder coach. That's my main professional thing. Today, I work with startup founders, helping them to really learn what it means to be a CEO of a startup as the company starts to scale, and in particular, to make a decision and possibly execute the decision of stepping down. So if a founder thinks about hiring someone else to lead the business instead of them, that's the process which I'm familiar with because 4 years ago, I stepped down as a founder CEO of my own business. I had someone else to lead the business instead of me. And since then, I've been on the board of directors. So today I help other founders to go through this journey if necessary. So that's what I do today. And for most of the last decade, I've been an entrepreneur, building a company, running a business. So I'm familiar with that part of life as well.
Nice that now you're helping other people in doing these things, which was kind of a challenge for yourself. And I mean, it's a big deal because after you are building a company for 10 years and it's kind of your baby, handing it over to someone else, I guess it's a big challenge.
It can be, yes, because there is a decision. How do you make it such a big decision to trust the company you've been building for many years to someone else? And then there is the execution, putting it in practice. As a company CEO, you can't really give a 2-week notice and say, I'm off, it's not my problem anymore. You need to orchestrate the transition to help find the successor, to do a proper handover, to make sure that the business goes through the CEO transition in the best possible shape. And it's not rocket science in a way. But at the same time, there are many moving parts and nearly everyone does it for the first time. So in almost every case, the founder goes through this process without any experience of doing it before, which is what makes it a bit difficult.
No, it makes sense that there is a figure like you, a coach like you, because as a startup entrepreneur, I guess you follow many guidebooks, many playbooks, how to hire people, how to raise money, how to do this, how to do that. But probably there isn't, there wasn't because now you wrote a book about it, but there wasn't a playbook about how to hand over the company to someone else.
Yes, you're absolutely right. In the startup community, we're talking about starting things, building things, hiring people, going through various difficult challenges. And of course, all of this is really important. But as you've said, there is very little written or said about the process of leaving your business or replacing yourself with another chief executive. It happens surprisingly often, but it's not something which a lot of people talk about publicly. And yes, that's what I've tried to change with the book that I wrote.
That's super nice from you. I mean, before diving into this process, I want to go like back in the days when you were starting your company at first. What were your expectation? Why did you wanted to build this company at the beginning? Which were the expectation of your entrepreneurial journey? Would you expect it such a long run? Would you expect it to step down as a CEO? I'm very curious to know what were your thoughts at the beginning of this journey.
So at the beginning of the journey, I wanted to build a company, not specifically the company that I built. It's not that I didn't care about the problem I was trying to solve, but I wanted to build the businesses. And so I was going one idea after the other, just trying different things. And this particular business, it just happened to work at that particular time. As in the idea started to get traction and we could see, my co-founder and I could see the path towards building a business here. But it's also true that I've been trying different things and iterating and learning and failing year after year, just learning what it takes to take an idea from nothing to some traction.
That's super interesting that you were trying different things at the same time and seeing which one was taking off.
And I definitely didn't expect it to take so much time. The business is still up and running and has most of its potential ahead of it. But back at the time, if I think about myself in my late 20s when all of this began, my co-founder and I, we genuinely thought we would build something in maybe 2, maybe 3 years, then sell it for some amount of money. We didn't try to build a huge unicorn or anything. We just want to build a business that works. But of course, once we started doing it, a year or 2 years in, we realized inevitably that building a business is a far bigger endeavor. It's going to take a far bigger effort. And so we learned probably the obvious in hindsight lesson that yes, building something just takes time.
I heard this from many founders. So the first 1-2 years is kind of a honeymoon, and then you start seeing how the reality really works. Why do you think this happens?
I guess it's just a process of growing up. Before you do something, you got ideas about what it's going to be, but actual lived experience of doing it gives you a far richer perspective. I think it's not unique to businesses. I think it's just life in general. We have an idea of something, and when we actually try to do it, we inevitably learn that our idea wasn't quite exactly the same as real experience. It's not that I didn't understand that intellectually. It's not that I wasn't reading books written by more experienced entrepreneurs. But it's also fair to say that to a significant degree, I was just naive about the level of effort and commitment that would be required to take the business to realize its potential.
I see. And which were the first episodes that made you realize after these 2-3 years, wow, this is actually harder than what I expected?
Actually, I realized that it's harder than I expected very, very quickly. The hardest year was the first one. It actually became a little bit easier later because we got to a cash flow break even at the end of our first year.
Oh, wow.
And things become significantly easier once you get to a break-even point, once you are not losing money anymore. But the first year of running against the clock and looking at the depleting bank balance, trying to get to a sustainable point before we run out of money and trying different things and failing, that was probably the most intense bit. But then we realized that, okay, it's a bit easier now that we're at the break-even point, but it's still going to be a long-term journey. But at the same time, it also didn't feel like a problem. It was a useful lesson, but okay, fair enough. So it takes time, but it's okay.
Wow, pretty interesting. And how about when you decided instead that it was time to move on and hand over the company to a new chief executive?
So it was a very gradual process. I think the first moment when I started thinking that maybe I'm not the best person to lead the company was the shift from business to consumer to business business. When we started our business, we were fully focused on consumers. We made our money by charging individuals. And a few years in, we had to completely change the business model. And today, most of our revenue comes from companies, something like 80, if not 90% of our revenue.
Because, sorry, I forgot to introduce to the listeners, but can you tell us in a minute what is Makers? What do you focus on?
So Makers trains software developers. At the very beginning, we focused on training software developers and helping them get jobs, which is what we do even today. But at the beginning, we were charging students to learn to code and get a job as a software developer. Today, we still train developers, place them into jobs. But today, almost all of our revenue comes from companies hiring them. So that's the shift from consumers to businesses. And this requires a different set of skills. So when I realized that we need to reorient the company towards a business to business market, it also made me wonder if I'm the right person to lead the business, because I started it in the consumer space. I understood how to sell to consumers, how to build our product for individual software developers. But working with companies is a different task requiring different skills. So that was the very first point. But then over the last couple of years, I was also coming back to this thought for more personal reasons. I just didn't really feel like it was the kind of work I was meant to be doing at the time.
Interesting.
It was just a deep sense that what I'm doing is not what I should be doing professionally, and I should be doing something else in some kind of a deeper sense.
So you felt you didn't find too much meaning for yourself.
In a way, yes.
How do you define meaning? Like for the people listening, how would you help them understand if what they're doing is meaningful or not? I mean, I guess you just need to feel it, but how was that for you?
I don't know if there is a single simple answer here, because the question you're really asking is, what is it that I should be doing with my life? And everyone discovers the answer slowly, progressively, and nearly always painfully by doing wrong things, and in the process learning some valuable lessons about themselves and the world, and eventually finding a more authentic, more meaningful way to live. And what I'm trying to say is that the answer here is deeply personal for each of us. That's why after millennia and millennia of people trying to find the answer for themselves and learning a lot of useful things for the process, every person still goes through the same journey. It's, in a way, it's a process of growing up. It's not a problem to be fixed. It's just how we are as human beings.
It's interesting. It's not a problem to be fixed, but it's something we need to experience. It's part of the growth itself.
Yeah, exactly. Just like we grow and we experience, let's say, a certain set of challenges as teenagers. Every teenager will have a number of things to complain about in the world. You remember what it was like for you to be 15. I remember what it was like for me to be 15. It's just a phase of life with its own worldview, its own challenges, its own advantages and disadvantages. But it's not a problem to be fixed. It's just life. And so the search for meaning, purpose, trying to figure out what is our work to do in this world, what is our calling, what is our vocation. It's a search that all of us have to follow. For me, it was a sense of realization. It was a realization that just a deep feeling that something is not quite right, that something needs to change here, that if I keep doing it for the next 5 or 10 years, life will take me in some kind of a wrong direction, even if I can't put my finger on it.
I see. Yeah, you didn't have a calling. You felt like, okay, this has been my road, my way, but now I feel it's going into a direction which is not mine anymore. It's super important, I guess, to being able to listen to yourself. Sometimes we forget to do it, but I think we should always find some time, find some practices to listen to ourselves and to make sure that what we are doing is aligned with who we are.
Yeah. And it's going to change with time.
Yeah,
which is,
it always
again,
changes. Yeah.
Yeah, no answer is final. It's just a process.
And in your case, how were you able to listen to yourself? You were like, I don't know, meditating, you were just thinking with your own self, your body was giving you signals. How was it for you?
I think meditation was becoming a big part of my life at this point, because I first started meditating around the time I founded the business, mostly to address stress. I was really, really stressed pretty much every single day from morning till evening, because it just felt like there was so much to do and so much to be stressed about. And someone suggested meditation as a way to calm down a little bit. And after a few years of meditating and taking the practice a bit more seriously, I think it was in the silence of meditation, when I would go in a meditation retreat or slow down, that I would get maybe a clearer sense that the way I work and live doesn't quite serve me as well. There is some kind of misalignment between again, what I should be doing and what I was doing. And meditation was just a method, a space to experience it a little bit more clearly.
Wow. And once you had this realization, so, okay, probably this is going in a direction which is not aligned with myself anymore. How did you navigate it, all of those feelings? And how did you set up this slow process of handovering the company to someone else?
So at first I tried to ignore those feelings and pretend that nothing is happening. And I procrastinated on it for quite a while, for maybe 1 or 2 years.
You were ignoring them because you felt like, I'm the CEO, this is my job, I need to go through the hustle.
Yes, of course, there are all kinds of excuses like, this is my job. Who else is going to do it if not me? There are problems to solve. We are not a big enough company to really afford an expensive professional CEO. There are some immediate challenges that need to be addressed. Do I really know that if I step down, the situation is going to be any different? Because maybe it's just my fantasy that I need to do something else. Maybe I will realize that actually it was just a fantasy and I should have stayed, but it's a one-way door. Once you step down as a CEO, you can't really change your mind 3 months later. So I had all kinds of doubts in my mind. And eventually, a combination of things that happened all at the same time. I was really stressed. So my mental health was not in the best shape. My marriage just collapsed and my then wife and I decided to separate. The business just went through a fundraising round, which was, again, somewhat stressful. So all of these things just happened at the same time. And at some point, I sat down with the chair of the board and said, I'm not going anywhere. It's not an emergency and I'll keep running the business for as long as necessary, but we should probably start a conversation about finding a new chief executive. And it took us over a year to actually orchestrate the transition because a CEO succession is not a fast process, but it kicked off the conversation. And over the following months, we reflected on whether we do need to replace me as a CEO, who should be the successor, where the company is going, and finding the successor, doing the handover. And then the coronavirus happened in the process, which also complicated things because it was 2020, the first year of the pandemic. And so overall, it took slightly over a year before I could close my laptop and just take a deep breath and step into the next chapter of my life.
Wow. And did your co-founder, your partners, and the board welcome your idea to find a new chief executive, or at the beginning there was some contract?
No. So my co-founder left the business very early on. We started the business together, but he left in 2014. So I was the only remaining founder running the business at that point. But the board was surprisingly open. We had a really, and still have, because I'm still part of the same board, we have a very good and trusted relationship. And me opening the conversation early enough when I was still able and committed to run the business for as long as necessary also made the situation easier because there was no time pressure. I started the conversation, we trusted each other, there was no rush, and so we could afford to take our time and discuss everything slowly and find the best moment.
It was very mature. If you would have done it after 1-2 years, you would have had maybe a breakdown and the transition would have happened anyway, but in a not optimal way.
Exactly. And this is, by the way, one of the biggest mistakes founders make in this situation. They feel like, okay, I'm not at the breakdown point yet. I can still run the business. I can still do my job. I'm not fully committed to replacing myself as a CEO. And they get to the point when they have no other choice but to step down. And by this point, they are not really in a position to orchestrate the transition, and it ends up a far more difficult situation. So yes, you're absolutely right. Starting this conversation early enough made it far easier for all of us to do a good job.
And how was like finding the right person? How did you navigate the different candidates to take over your job? And why did you pick one specific person?
We got really lucky. So we basically wrote the job spec at the point when I was about to give this job spec to the chair of the board because it would be her job to run the search. The chair of the board said that she would like to be considered herself. And long story short, she joined as a new CEO, replacing me. And that was incredibly lucky because as the chair of the board, she knew the company, we knew each other well, and it was an insider transition. And this really, really simplified things. So basically, we never went to the open market interviewing a wide range of candidates.
I guess that was very nice for you and for the company.
Yes, truth be told, I didn't really think that I would be able to persuade her to join because she, and her name is Claudia Harris. At the time, she was a CEO of another business. She's got an incredible resume. She was a partner at McKinsey, worked at the high level of UK government, studied at Harvard at an MBA level, did other many impressive things. So basically, she's got an incredible range of options in terms of
Yeah.
things she could do professionally. And I didn't really think I would be able to persuade her to take over as the CEO of my small startup. But long story short, that's exactly what happened. I somehow managed to persuade her to join Makers as a chief executive, and she's been running the business for the last 4.5 years, since 2020, and she's been doing an incredible job. So
Wow.
I'm super, super happy.
Wow, I'm happy to hear that. And tell me, how was after the transition, not being operational involved day to day? How did you feel?
In short, great. I was really lucky to be in a position to not to rush into doing anything professional as soon as possible. So for a couple of months, I did just nothing whatsoever other than enjoying Portugal. Around the same time, my partner and we also moved to Portugal, which is why we met in the Algarve. 4 years ago, I moved from London to Lagos. And at first, I just took some rest, relaxed, let myself enjoy every day without endless emails or problems to solve, without really doing much. And then I started navigating the next chapter of my life. I've long been thinking about training as a coach, so I started doing my first training course, started working with first clients as a founder coach, and over time started to realize that I like doing it. I seem to be okay doing it. Other people enjoy what I do, and that's what I've been doing since.
Now you're living a more authentic life. And this transition to becoming a coach, was that spontaneous? So people were reaching out to you asking for advice on your transition, saying, "Hey, I need to do the same. Can we chat?" Or you felt like, "Okay, I want to help people doing this," and you reach out to founders. How did it work at first?
A bit of both. So I've been thinking about doing coach training for many years before. Actually, since I worked with the very first coach I ever worked with in 2015. His name is Jerry Colonna, and he is an executive coach in Colorado in the States. I worked with him when I was running the business as the founder CEO, and he and his team had an incredible impact on me personally, on how I see what does it mean to be a CEO, what does it mean to be a founder, what does it mean to be a leader. And I felt like I learned such a tremendous amount from Jerry and his team that ever since I had been thinking it's something that I would love to learn how to do one day.
Mm.
And so many years later, when I stepped down as a CEO, it was one of the things I really wanted to try. So that's why I went into a coaching training. At the same time, when I told other people that I stepped down as a CEO and I'm looking to work with other founders as a coach, some people started reaching out. We started working together, and I realized that there are quite a few people who want to have conversations about CEO succession, about leaving their jobs or making a decision. And there are very few resources or guidelines or even people to talk to. And so over the years, the focus of my work started to shift towards CEO succession as the focus area, but that this was not where I intended to go at the beginning. So the intention was to train as a coach and see what it would be like to work with others. But when I actually started doing it, I realized that my experience of stepping down and orchestrating a CEO transition is actually relevant for many others.
Nice that you put your passion with your story together in order to do your next job. And can you tell me some stories about some of your customers? I'm just curious about it. If you can share, also like anonymously without saying the names.
I'm struggling a little bit with this question, not only because of the anonymity, that's kind of part of it, but another thing is that I don't really want to make it sound like credit should go to me. Because coaching as an activity provides a container for clients to do their work. It's not like they come to me with a problem and I solve their problem, and here is a client with a solution provided by the coach.
Sure. Yeah, you're not a consultant.
Yes, it's not how it works. Well, sometimes I get a little bit more operational involved, but by and large, it's the client who does all the work. And so are there stories of founders who felt like they don't want to run their business and then they decided to step down and now they're in a better place? Yes. But equally, there are stories of founders who thought that maybe they should step down. And by exploring all of it, they did not. And they are still running their businesses as a CEO, but with less internal conflict and with less thoughts of stepping down. Is that a good outcome? In my view, absolutely yes.
Yeah, sure, sure. Wow, very interesting. Yeah, you're not like selling the solution of I will help you find a new CEO and you will not be operational anymore, but I will help you navigate what you're living and you will take the best decision so you can live your best life, basically.
Exactly. So the way I see it is that the right thing is to figure out what the right thing is and then do it.
Mm-hmm.
In some cases, it will be hiring another CEO. In other cases, it will be staying as a CEO and leaning further into the job because this job is quite counterintuitive. For founders who've never ran a business before, it can be quite stressful, but not because they shouldn't be doing it and not because they can't do it, but because they might not know how to approach it. They might not know what is expected of them. They might not really understand what the job is, what kind of struggle is normal, it's just part of the job, and what kind of struggle is the wrong kind of struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And so the coaching work helps founders to really get a bit more clarity on what they're experiencing, what's happening and why, and then find what's the right next step is. And sometimes it will be stepping down, sometimes it will be staying, sometimes it will be changing some aspects of their roles, and sometimes it will be something completely different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you help them becoming more aware, which is the most important thing.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, this such a general question, but I'm curious, how do you, and it's part of your job, so I don't know if you can disclose something about it, but in general, like, how do you do it? What are the right question to navigate a person becoming more aware?
As I often say, in my experience, coaching to a significant degree boils down to two questions. What's going on and what are you going to do about it? There are countless ways of approaching these two questions, but this is the basic process, getting more awareness of what's happening and then translating this awareness into next steps, into something different, into trying something new. The way it actually happens in the coaching process works largely through listening very attentively and noticing things that the founder I'm working with might not notice themselves.
Mhm.
So it's much less about speaking and definitely not about telling founders lots of things, and much more about listening in order to try to hear things that they might not be aware of yet, and then using this awareness to help them find a richer understanding of what's going on. So yes, that's how I would describe what happens in the dynamic of the coaching process. And maybe another thing that's important here is that this process is inherently a bit open, if not mysterious, in the sense that neither the client nor the coach know where the conversation is supposed to go. It's like together we create an open space and have a coaching conversation. It's a bit like a dance, an improvisation, and no one really knows what exactly we're going to uncover in the process, which is a good thing because if we think we know what we are going to uncover, either the client or the coach, then it's not going to be much of an exploration. It's like the entire point is to find things that we can't even think of yet.
Yeah, that's probably the difference between a good coach and a great coach. So a good coach gives you some tools to navigate what you're doing, but a great coach helps you understand. I don't give you the tools. I understand by listening and by paying attention to all details. What are the right tools for you?
I would say that both have its place. It's not like specific tools or even sharing specific experience doesn't have place in coaching. But I think the skill of a coach lies in knowing how to use it in the most helpful way. And this comes from experience. It's just a question of learning and trying and reflecting on successes and failures. And over the years and over hours and hours of coaching, we learn how to do a good job here.
And do you think that in order to be a good coach, you need to have experience what you're coaching before yourself? So in this case, for you, like in order to be a good startup CEO succession coach, you experienced CEO succession before. Do you think this is required in order to be a good coach?
So there is a bit of complexity here. So I'm going to give a long answer.
I love it.
So when it comes to the skill of coaching itself, just a pure coaching, which is not specific to any particular domain, the coach can do an excellent job even if they don't really know the world or the specific problems that their client is facing. If anything, it can be helpful not to know, because then the coach can come to the situation with an open mind without any preconception about how things should be and really help the client to find their own way forward. So that's true. Coaches are not supposed to be experts when it comes to the problems their clients are facing. At the same time, the word coaching is a very, very vague label which covers all kinds of things, from things that I personally would call consulting and advisory, and other people would call coaching, and things that would be coaching by the strictest of definitions. And of course, there is a lot of stuff in the gray area in between. If we take, for example, CEO succession, which is what I do as a coach, on the one hand, I'm using my coaching skill to help founders navigate the process. But at the same time, I operate in a very specific niche, and here my experience is relevant. Some people would argue that this is not just coaching or exclusively coaching, or it's a mix of coaching and advisory, and I would agree with it. So maybe let's put it this way. If we're talking about applying coaching in one specific area, then yes, practical experience in that area is probably relevant. But at the same time, coaching as a general skill set absolutely does not imply that the coach is familiar with the problem their client is trying to navigate.
Super interesting, all your journey into becoming a coach. And going back to your story, I still have a lot of questions about your transition. You mention often the word stress. Do you think it is possible, being a founder, navigating all the problems, all the infinitive to-do list, and yet living this experience not stressful, or is not possible at all?
I would, the way I see it is it possible to run a marathon and not feel out of breath? Well, maybe not. If you try to run a marathon distance, you will push your body to a certain limit. But at the same time, it doesn't have to be a problem. It's not a problem that the body is stressed if you choose to run a marathon. It's part of the process. It's an experience. And so a job of a founder CEO is stressful because in a way, the nature of the job is to deal with uncertainty, is to solve a never-ending stream of never-ending problems. And there is never enough time, there is never enough resources, and there are always some existential challenges coming your way. It's literally the nature of the job. It's not meant to be relaxing. At the same time, it doesn't necessarily have to be a problem in a sense that it completely crushes the person and leads to a burnout and ruins their life or anything else. It's not meant to be easy, but at the same time, it's meant to be doable.
You learn to do it through the experience and the practice itself. There's no way to do it. Like as a marathon, can you run a marathon without losing your breath? Yeah, probably if you've run enough marathon, you're able to do it. Or you acknowledge, okay, I don't have enough breath, but it's okay. It's part of the marathon itself. Same happens when you're building a company.
Yeah, exactly. And you can only learn how to run a marathon by running a marathon.
It's the only way.
Learn it.
Yeah, it's the only
Yeah,
way.
you can't learn it
Yeah,
by
you can hear
reading
advices,
books.
which of course are going to be helpful, but the only way to actually learn it is by doing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm very curious about what is the right balance when you're a founder between your work and the other aspects of your life. If you could give some advices to the people listening who are right now building a company, how can they find the right balance for you?
I don't think there is a single answer that would work for everyone. And I've seen different people answer this question in very different ways. Some people prioritize work and just accept that the rest of the life is going to suffer because you just can't have everything. There are not enough hours in the day. Some people put very firm boundaries and say, I'm closing my laptop at 5 p.m. every day and spending the rest of the day with my family because that's what's important. And even if the company crashes and burns, I'm closing my laptop at 5. And really everything in between. So my recommendation would be to reflect on the question often and try to find an answer that works for you, given your specific situation, your specific values, your specific goals, your specific life circumstance. Because what's going to be right for one person is not necessarily going to be right for another person. And just because it works for someone else doesn't mean that it's going to work for you. So that's why my advice is just an ongoing reflection. See what works, reflect on why it works or why it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Keep learning.
Do you think you should be, on some degree, in a healthy way, egoistic? Because I think if you ask your company, your company cannot talk, but if you ask your company what is the right balance, your company would say, you just spent 100% of your time on me, like on building the company. Because as you said, there's a never-ending list of problems to be solved, and there isn't enough time to do it. But of course, if you have a family and you also want to spend time to them, you need to take some time away from the company and put it into the family. Do you think you should be somehow egoistic while you try to find the right balance for yourself?
So startup founders inevitably have to work hard in order for their companies to be successful. And at the same time, hard work is never an answer to an infinite to-do list. Because if you've got an infinite to-do list, 24 hours a day is not enough. I promise you, 48 hours wouldn't be enough either. It's not a question of how much you work. And then there is a question of, okay, even if the founder focuses exclusively on their business and forgets about the rest of their life, how sustainable that is. If it leads to a burnout 12 months later, ultimately it's the business that's going to suffer because the leader will not be as efficient. So we need to balance all these considerations. It's not a problem that can be solved just by working hard. There is a balance between short-term priorities and long-term priorities because it's a long-term endeavor. Founders need to keep running their businesses for many years. And then, of course, the job changes. What founders do in the first or second year is materially different compared to what they do in year 10.
Yeah.
Where hopefully the company is much larger, bigger, and there is money to spend.
Right. And the reason I actually asked you this question, you were very stressed at work and also in your private life. You had some struggles to solve with your ex-wife, if I understood correct. It's something very personal, so I don't want to go into the details, but with all the awareness you have now, how would you handle that in a different way? I'm just imagining someone who has a wife and has a business. Of course, these things are both very important and both require attention.
I think in retrospect, I made the mistake plenty of founders make in this situation. I prioritized the business over my personal life for too long because it's a very easy mistake to make because in the office, at work, something is always urgent. But personal life never feels urgent. After all, we're married, everything seems to be fine. I can always stay late in the office or cancel a personal holiday or just work on the weekend or somehow put the company first. And the thing is that the damage it does creeps in slowly over time. It doesn't feel like a problem until it becomes a problem. It's a bit like smoking. 1 cigarette is nothing, 2 cigarettes is nothing, maybe 2 years of smoking is nothing, and then suddenly you've got lung cancer. Wow, okay, now it's a problem.
Wow, great metaphor.
Yeah, it happens very gradually and then suddenly. And that's the mistake I made, and that's the mistake that I saw other founders make because work feels very, very urgent. There is always a fundraise, an unhappy employee, cash crunch, a product release, like you name it. There is always some emergency to deal with. But if the founder chooses this emergency over their relationship day after day, month after month, year after year, at some point there will be no relationship.
It's inevitable.
You know, there is a book called Hard Thing About Hard Things. So in that book, somewhere there is a wonderful dialogue between the father and the son, where a father asks the son, you know what's cheap? No, flowers. And you know what's expensive? What? Divorce. And there is a lot of wisdom in this. Flowers are cheap, divorce is expensive. There are always things to fix in the office. It often comes at the cost of personal relationship.
Yeah, I see. But everything in your journey has made you way more aware. And because all of this, now you're living the life you are living right now.
And yes, and I don't want to somehow make it sound like the life I'm living right now is perfect or pain-free or it's just different. I made mistakes, learned some lessons. I'm making new mistakes, learning new lessons, and life goes on.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for sharing that, Evgeny. And a big topic I want to talk with you about is meditation. So you already mentioned something about it, but I want to understand your journey. So you told us at the beginning that you started meditating while you were building the company during the first year. I'm just curious to know, how did you approach meditation? And what is meditation for you?
So at first, it was just a tool to address stress. I felt stressed all the time, 24/7, because there was always some kind of an emergency at work. And I tried sitting and focusing on my breath for 10-15 minutes at a time, just to calm down. I don't think it really helped much. And I went on my first meditation retreat because a friend of mine suggested it could be a good thing. I had a horrible experience. I quit after 4 days because I just couldn't handle it.
And actually, I listened to your episode at Founder Meditation, which I really enjoyed. If I'm not wrong, it was a Vipassana retreat, right?
Yeah.
So you started with a hardcore retreat.
Yes, but I didn't know.
For the people not knowing, a Vipassana retreat is a 10 days retreat where you meditate 10 hours a day, if I'm not mistaken, and you cannot talk, right?
Yes, that's right. And well, one correction is that here we're talking about a very specific kind of Vipassana retreats as taught by, in the tradition of a teacher called Goenka.
Mm-hmm.
Vipassana as a meditation method is incredibly wide and broad, and different teachers teach Vipassana in different ways. It doesn't have to be as extreme. But this particular format, as taught by Goenka, has a particularly strict format of 10-day meditation retreat. Yes, no talking, no speaking, no reading, no writing, no eye contact. Basically, no nothing other than meditating from 4 o'clock in the morning until I think the bell in the evening is 10 o'clock, and then you get 6 hours of sleep. So everyone is also sleep deprived all the time and a bit hungry because there are no dinners. So basically, the environment is a little bit strict. And for complete beginners like me, who have no experience of meditation and who are particularly stressed, and at the time I was just under a lot of pressure because it was the very beginning of starting the business, so I was just not in a great mental shape. It was not the right first retreat. It was a little bit like taking a person who never ran more than 2 kilometers and asking them to run a marathon.
Yeah.
They are going to die at probably kilometer 5 before they complete the entire distance. So my point is, I found it far more difficult than I was able to handle. I quit after 4 days. I called the therapist and said that my mind is going crazy. I've got no idea what's happening, but I need to talk to someone. I didn't even touch meditation for a couple of months because I couldn't even sit for 5 or 10 minutes a day. But eventually, somehow, I found my way back to meditation. I went back to Vipassana because in a very, very selfish way, I just wanted to complete it because it felt like a challenge that I failed, that I really need to figure out how to sit all 10 days. And so I went back, I completed the retreat. I absolutely hated the second one as well. But then over the years, I started going to different retreats and reading books on meditation and experimenting with different styles. And so over time, found my way to meditate in a way that works for me. Today, meditation is a big part of my life. Just before this recording in the morning, I went to sit for an hour with a local Zen group. It was just a wonderful experience.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the start of my day.
What would you say is your way of meditating? How does it work for you?
I don't really know how to answer this question because I know that it works in a sense that it's helpful and it feels deeply right and meaningful. At the same time, the years I experimented with different styles, listened to different teachers, tried different approaches. So I can't say that I found the method or the teacher and that's the thing that works for me. It was rather the process of learning how to engage with meditation in a different way, not see it as a challenge or an achievement or something I have to learn to do, but as a practice, something that helps me to be more aligned with myself and the rest of the world.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, like a space to be more present and learn more about myself. And the specific method, in my experience, doesn't really matter. It could be Zen, it could be Vipassana, it could be something else. It could be social meditation that we tried when you and I met in the Algarve. There are different teachers, different styles, different methods, but ultimately, as far as I can tell, all these methods and styles and approaches lead in the same direction. And not just meditation, but the different spiritual practices in general. Whether it's meditation or whether it's yoga or Christian prayer or Qigong or Tai Chi or any spiritual practice that invites us to learn more about ourselves, be more present and take things deeper, I think it's ultimately takes us roughly in the same direction.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Like there are different styles, there are different methods, and we need to remember that meditation itself is a gateway that allows you to enter this state where you are more aware of yourself, you're way more present, and you are able to listen to yourself.
Yeah.
You mentioned that we tend to identify ourselves with our thoughts, and with meditation, we are able to be the observer of our thoughts. And in your experience, which were the thoughts you were most identifying with, and how did you break free from these thoughts with meditation?
So first, let me say that I'm still very much in the process of breaking free, and that's a lifelong journey. So I'm very much practicing meditation, but I'm not going to claim any huge achievements or breakthroughs in terms of ultimate freedom. There are people far more qualified than me to speak about this. But what I can say is that the ability to be more aware of the contents of my experience, of thoughts, feelings, sensations, and in particular the sense of I, whether it's I as a person or I as an observer or I as a witness, just a sense that there is a center to this entire experience here, has been quite helpful in a way which is difficult to put into words. Meditation helps me to realize that I took this thing for granted as just as a feature of reality without even realizing that this is how I see the world. But this is just a yet another thought or yet another sensation. It's one way to see this process is that meditation allows us to deconstruct our experience and keep breaking it down. And as far as I can tell, this process really continues until there is nothing to break down even further, and then there is just nothing, but not in the sense that there is lack of existence or death or anything, but rather nothing permanent or stable or inherent or unchangeable. It's just life goes on, things change.
Yeah, removing all these thoughts, removing all these clouds, making your mind clean at the end.
Or rather seeing through the thoughts, not really removing them, but rather not seeing them as something permanent or serious or terribly important.
That's very nice. Not seeing your thoughts as something terribly important. I like that. It's not easy, but yeah, not seeing your thought as something terribly important because everything changes and not taking yourself too serious. That's a good reminder.
Yeah.
Yeah. One last thing that it comes to my mind regarding meditation. I also wrote this down while I was listening to the episode you did at Founder Meditation. You said that you don't believe in free will. And I got very, very curious about it. I don't want to speculate because maybe what you're thinking is something completely different, but this is what I understood. Can you elaborate on that? And can you tell me this concept of there's no free will?
So this is a question that has been debated in philosophy for centuries and centuries. And there are different philosophical perspectives. What I meant in that episode and how I describe my personal position is that when I reflect on my personal experience, when I notice what's happening inside my own mind, I can't really point to any mechanism or any process that I would describe as free will. In the way I understand free will, it's almost like something that exists outside and independent of this world, something that can manipulate this world, something that can make decisions that can then be applied to reality, but it's not really part of what's going on here.
Something above ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. In a way, I'm external to my computer and I can make a decision to launch a new program on this computer. So from this perspective, I can impose my will onto my laptop. But if I just look at my own thoughts, my own decisions, my own emotions, I can't find anything that could look like free will or even a decision-making center that would make decisions about free will. What I mean is that we don't decide to decide something. Thoughts come up, things happen. Something which happens in this moment is determined by what's been happening in the previous moment. And maybe it's not completely determined. Maybe there is a certain degree of randomness to it. Fair enough. But still can't really find or imagine a place where something like free will could even exist. So in a colloquial sense, of course, free will is an incredibly useful construct in the sense that you and I can have a conversation and I'm going to exercise my free will to show up online at a specific time in order for us to have a podcast recording.
Yeah.
So it's a very useful construct, but it's a construct in the sense that, let's say, democracy is a construct. Not in the sense that democracy doesn't exist. It very much does, but at the same time, it's an idea.
That the fact that we who are part of the democracy believe that there is a democracy, the belief makes that there's actually a democracy. But in reality, yeah, it's a construct, yeah.
Yeah, but
there's no such a thing as democracy.
Yeah, but it's an idea.
I can understand this image of democracy. It's very challenging to to understand the construct of decision. Just thinking out loud, because I think we talk about many decisions in your experience, the decision to start a startup, the decisions to transition as CEO, the decision into becoming a coach, the decision to meditate. Like, there are many decisions, but if all decisions made by free will are a construct, it means that the decision were made up by the causality of all this sequence of events, I guess.
Carlos, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
5 seconds ago, did you decide to make this movement with your hands?
No, not
But you
aware
did.
at least. Yeah,
Exactly, but it happened.
it happened.
Was it an act of free will?
Probably not, because I was not aware.
Yeah, but it happened.
But it happened, so it must be.
Yes, and I would guess that pretty much everything, if not everything that's happening in our life is happening.
It's happening.
Like, try to not, again, as an example, try not to exercise your free will for a day, even for 10 minutes, not to decide absolutely everything, and things will still continue to happen. Thoughts will keep arising, life will go on.
And also deciding not to do anything is a
Is also a
decision
decision.
itself. Yeah. So,
Yeah. Actually, speaking of this, there is a meditation exercise which can really shed a light on this. There is a meditation teacher called Shinzen Yang, and there is a video of YouTube on him where he describes a do nothing meditation. So I would recommend to all our listeners to go and find it on YouTube and just search do nothing meditation and actually try it. He explains it how to do it in great detail. But really, the instruction boils down to two very simple points. First, sit down, close your eyes on the meditation cushion, and resolve to do absolutely nothing during a meditation. Don't pay attention to anything. Don't not to pay attention to anything. Like, do absolutely nothing. And the decision not to do something is also a decision, so don't do that. And if you notice that you are doing something, then just stop doing it. So, for example, if you notice that you are paying attention to your breath, just stop doing it. And if you notice that you can't stop doing it means that you're not really in control there. Just then let it be. And the meditation instruction is very, very simple. Basically, don't do anything. If you notice yourself doing something, stop doing it. If you can't stop doing it, it means that you're not really in control there anyway, so let it be. But what this meditation instruction can help us understand is that regardless of whether we think we've got free will or whether we are not trying to make any decisions, the outcome is more or less the same. Life goes on. Decisions are taken. Actions happen. Life doesn't end. And so, in a way, there is this entire process of life which is going on regardless. And somewhere on top of it, there is a tiny structure called our ego that is trying to take a credit for everything good that's happening. But if we try to inspect the process, it's like trying to take a credit for sunrise every day. It's going to rise without me doing anything about it. It's just not a personal process.
Yeah. We can build a narrative on taking somehow credit on the sunrise, but yeah, it's just a narrative, but you cannot do it.
So that's basically my perspective on free will. If I try to find it, I don't find it. And as far as I can tell, no one really managed to do it either.
Yeah, super interesting. And this helps me going back to the reminder we told ourselves. So don't take your thought tremendously serious. Life goes on.
And this is, and again, just to stress, this is not to say that all these concepts, like free will and any other concepts, are useless. They are incredibly useful, but they are just that: concepts, ideas, thoughts, incredibly important, but ultimately ephemeral. Like money, an incredible idea. Like our entire world runs on money. The world's economy is impossible without money. And yet money is an idea. At least in the past, apparently it used to be a gold and something physical, tangible. Today it's numbers on the screen. We just all agree to play by the same rules, and so money runs the world, but it's an idea.
Really like your thought on free will, but how do you apply this thought on some people? Let me give you an example. Like if we talk about Elon Musk, like he probably has a strong will. So he's like, I want to build electric car. He does that. I want to land satellites on the space. He does that. He wants to build whatever venture, and he manages to, through his will, make sure everything aligns and make things happen. How do you put together what we just said on free will with a strong will as the one that someone like Elon Musk might have?
One way to to look at it, which is again yet another narrative, is to notice that you are describing Elon Musk from an external perspective. We're talking about him as a separate person. From this perspective, basically looking at him from the outside, it's very easy to talk about in terms of free will because, yes, he decided to found the company or to achieve some goal. And it's not specific to Elon Musk or any huge goal. It could be anyone doing anything, really.
Yeah.
So from our external perspective, it looks like, yes, this person has a free will and they are exercising it. At the same time, from an internal subjective first-person experience, it's just a process. In the sense that there is no separation between my sense of I or my thoughts and the rest of the world. So what may look like or what looks like free will on the outside, or rather can be described as free will on the outside, is just what's happening without any free will from a first-person perspective.
I see what you're saying. So basically, now we can connect all the dots and build a narrative through those dots based on free will. As I said, the example of Elon Musk, because we are seeing him and his decision externally. But probably if you put his shoes, probably he didn't know he wanted to build electric car. Because of some events that happened in his life, he found himself deciding to build electric cars. So there was this free will.
Yeah.
And same happens for all the other ventures. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, for example, if you look at the plant behind, it's growing very reliably in the direction of the window, to the point that I have to rotate it every couple of months so that it doesn't fall over. Is there any free will inside this plant trying to grow in the direction of the sun? Probably not. It's just responding to its environment. It's a process that's happening. But we as humans, we've got a very peculiar idea of seeing ourselves in others, including the idea of us as separate beings and these separate beings having free will. Like, the life on this planet existed for countless millions of years before humans, before any free will even came into the picture. Life didn't need free will.
Yeah.
Evolution happened, life happened,
Yeah.
sunrise happened every day.
This helps me understand why free will is actually an illusion. Like before human beings, like all organisms, all living or non-living matters was being perfectly and changing.
And not only this, apparently, and there are far more qualified people to talk about this, but apparently the mere idea of free will really was introduced just a few centuries ago by some Christian theologian who's basically trying to resolve a contradiction of how is it possible that there is an omnipotent, all-powerful God in charge of this entire universe, but evil still happens in a very practical way, that there are evil deeds and illnesses and death and suffering, and how would all-powerful, all-benevolent God allow this to happen? And one way out of this apparent conundrum is to come up with an idea of free will. Yes, there is God in charge of the universe, and this God has great intentions, but unfortunately, fallible humans have a free will, and out of our own stupidity, we do wrong things, kind of contradicting the will of God. So my point is that the entire idea of free will was introduced in the context of Christian thoughts trying to explain the contradiction between the perfection and power of the idea of God and the quite an obvious suffering that we're encountering day to day. But to go back to the previous point, life existed for a very long time before anyone came up with an idea of free will.
And it's the same, exactly the same life we are experiencing right now. There's no difference.
Exactly.
We just build this narrative, one above the other. Yeah.
And so my point is that it's not like it doesn't exist, but it's a useful idea. Yeah, just like countries exist. But at the same time, if I go to the border between Portugal and Spain, I will probably have great trouble actually telling the difference where is Portugal and where is Spain, because there is no border in the ground. It's still the same field or the same ocean or the same piece of land.
Yeah, this concept of living, like it always existed. Now we are building a narrative around it, but it's a useful idea. And probably as the plant you have in your background is responding to the environment and doing what is meant to be for its nature, probably we as humans should work on ourselves and try to do the same. So trying to be nature, try to react, try to be ourselves, responding to the environment, and letting go of all these overwhelming ideas that the ego is building.
We've got this grand narrative that we are separate people on some kind of a journey and we are going from somewhere to somewhere, from past into the future. But really, is there anything else other than here and now in the present moment and what we are experiencing right now? And whatever we call as past or the future is really a thought, an idea that we are experiencing the present for a fraction of a second.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Wow, I really love these parentheses on free will and what it brought me. I really love this conversation. Evgeny, before thanking you and saying bye, I want to ask you this question because I also asked the other guests, as in this podcast, we are often talking about authenticity. I mean, the answer will probably be a recap of some of the things you said, but what would you like to say to the listeners? What advice would you tell in order to live a more authentic life?
I would say a more authentic life starts with a more examined life. So be curious about what's going on, what's happening, what are you feeling, what are you thinking, how are you feeling? Just try to be as aware as you can be about what's happening in the present. And this, as a side effect, will probably help you find a way towards a more authentic life, however you define it.
I think it's a great starting and continuous point, but like listen to yourself, examine yourself, and you will, if you truly do it, then you will find your way to an authentic life. Again, thank you. Thank you very much for this conversation. And I'm very happy
I
that
really enjoyed it.
we open up to share contacts and yeah, all of this happened.
Yeah. Thanks so much for inviting me. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, I loved it.